All right, I'm going to do my impression of a MAGA talking about vaccines and autism. Why won't they let us study whether vaccines cause autism? Why aren't we allowed to talk about it? So that's all untrue. That's what they love to say. Now, let me give you some of the framework here. Autism diagnoses are going up. That's true. Diagnoses. Donald Trump and RFK Jr. are using that to try to drag the United States towards this vaccine hypothesis that has failed test after test. It's not, we're not allowed to see whether vaccines cause. No, it's we have the data. And the result of their insistence on this trash is a disaster. It's that parents are being scared away from life saving vaccines while RFK's Department of Health and Human Services, which is like a weird name for it when he's at the head of it, because they're not doing much health or not providing many services to humans, they waste time going, we've got to study it. Well, we've studied it. We have really strong research already. Now, the way it typically works is that these anti-vax activists whose goal is to just argue vaccines are bad. They don't really want the facts. They just want to go, vaccines are bad, okay? They love to say nobody's willing or allowed to investigate vaccines. Scientists are too scared or too corrupt or too controlled by pharmaceutical companies, or they're just Fauci and they should be in prison. But the whole thing is just fabricated. Vaccines have been studied in millions of kids, and we also have decades of data showing what happened to autism diagnoses as vaccines were introduced, added, changed, and removed. So we should investigate why autism diagnoses have increased. And one of the questions, whenever you diagnose something more, is are we getting better at diagnosing it, or are we diagnosing it differently, or is the underlying thing happening more? We've had autism experts on the show and we've talked about this. And of course, every explanation should be considered. We shouldn't just consider genetics and parental age and conditions during pregnancy and environmental exposures and screening and diagnostic rules and not vaccines. We should do all that stuff that I mentioned and then also consider whether vaccines are a factor, but we have. And considering everything doesn't mean we pretend every hypothesis fits the facts. Vaccines simply do not fit the facts with autism. And there's some pretty simple sort of logic tests, thought experiments that we can do. Let's start just with the timeline, okay? The combined MMR vaccine, measles, mumps, rubella, one shot for all three vaccines, started in 1971. And at that point, routine childhood vaccination had already been normal for decades. And after MMR started in 71, there were some other vaccines that became normal in the late 80s and some during the 90s. We see no jump in autism diagnoses when these vaccines appeared. Now, I know that the anti vax people love to say, well, over time, we've added more vaccines, and over time, the autism diagnosis rate has gone up. And that's true, but you've got to think a little more. I've got my thinking, make truth great again hat on, and I'm going to be able to do a little more thinking. Each time if there was a relationship to vaccines, you wouldn't expect a steady increase in autism diagnosis. You would see a jump when a new vaccine is added. And if you overlay the vaccine schedule and autism diagnoses, yes, autism diagnosis moves up over time, but they don't move together. So that should be our first sort of red flag. Now, let's look at some numbers. CDC monitoring found autism in about 1 in 158-year-olds in the year 2000. And by 2022, it was about 1 in 31 across the communities that were studied. Now, that is a significant increase in diagnosis. But one of the things that has to be considered is that more diagnoses do not automatically mean autism suddenly appeared at that rate. There was a time when autism was defined much more narrowly and much less well understood. And over time, we both got better at screening and the definition expanded. I've spoken with a lot of my friends from elementary school that I'm still in touch with. And we've kind of had this, and some of them are doctors now, by the way, physicians, I should say. And universally, we kind of have this realization, both my physician friends and pediatrician friends and just lay people, which is that there were kids who were maybe unfortunately considered weird or different when we were in elementary school with no explanation given, who now in retrospect we realize were clearly autistic. They were on the autism spectrum. Nothing wrong with that. Just at the time, between teachers and doctors and parents, there wasn't the awareness. This was the early 90s. There wasn't the awareness or tools to diagnose as early. And so over time, parents, teachers, and doctors learned to recognize some of the signs. And for generations, this was missed. So there might have been kids at one point, as I said, they were just, kind of unfortunately labeled weird, or maybe they were considered cognitively delayed or something like that. And now we are seeing earlier and maybe more accurate autism diagnosis. So that's one factor. There's a study of Canadian kids which found that more than half of the increase from 96 to 2004 was just kids moving into from some other special ed category into, oh, we figured out that these kids actually are on the autism spectrum. That's half of the increase over that period of time. Then we can look at some direct vaccine studies. There is a Danish study that looked at about 650,000 kids. And what it found was that the MMR vaccine, which is the one that some people go, vaccines in general might cause autism, but others say it's specifically the MMR vaccine. That study found that the MMR vaccine did not increase autism risk. It didn't increase it overall. It didn't increase it among kids determined to be more vulnerable. And it didn't increase in a tracked community after vaccination. Another analysis looked at 1.25 million kids, and it found no connection between autism and vaccines, MMR, or thimerosal, which is sometimes a sort of more specific allegation. And the thimerosal test is very clear. Thimerosal was removed from just about, it's an adjuvant, I believe it's called. RFK loves to talk about it. Thimerosal was removed from just about every childhood vaccine around 2001. If it was having an effect on autism, you might have expected that the rate of autism diagnosis might have gone down after you removed this thing, or that the rate of increase in diagnosis might have just angled down, but it didn't. Autism diagnoses kept going up even when thimerosal was removed from just about every vaccine. So a year ago, about last year, the World Health Organization looked at all the evidence again, and they said, we just don't find any causal link, even with vaccines that contain thimerosal or aluminum. And yet, what did RFK do? He directed the CDC to weaken its messages about vaccines not causing autism. Trump's HHS is using federal authority to revive a failed scare campaign and start confusing parents again. And my pediatrician friends say, I've got parents coming in going, I want to delay the vaccines, which they can do, or I'd like to separate out MMR into just the measles, just the mumps, and just the rubella, which isn't available in the United States. This is something that the Trump administration has suggested to parents, just do measles and then the other. That's not available in the United States. It's just not something pediatricians have access to. So families deserve to know the honest research. They deserve better services. Obviously, we need to be supporting families, but we don't need this obsession that keeps demanding, we're not allowed to investigate. They want to investigate, by which they usually mean looking at Facebook links, until they get the answer they want. And for as long as the facts don't give them the answer they want, we're not allowed. I talk about this, not vaccines specifically, but I talk about the health disinformation silos in my forthcoming book, Pay Attention. If you haven't ordered it yet, but as if there's another reason the Trump administration is going to try to destroy this book, I talk about how people end up in these environments where they can't get out of a disinformation cycle. Pre-order the book, davidpakman.com/attention. Very limited number of signed copies remaining. The audiobook is available. The ebook is available. It's all happening. Appreciate you watching. Stick around for this next video and don't forget to hit subscribe so you actually see our uploads. You can also catch the full podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.